So let's see, lots of roles for devs out there, but what's this about? I guess it's talking about like lots of devs out there, and yeah, depends on what kind of things you're interested in. Yep, for sure.
But again, like if you're desperately in need of money, just take any job, right? They all pay really well.
Yeah.
Work on it for 6 months and just like make some cash, and then go back to what you prefer to be doing, right? 6 months is just like I think on the edge of being doable, even if it's soul crushing. You can usually manage for 6 months without hurting too much.
Uh, yeah, so let's see. Traveling solo is the best experience I've ever had, and I did it a few times. A few years later, I wrote a book to nerds can do it. Yep.
So,
And then they also, this is G Volpe, and then they said that, hey, Sandy, I admire your work.
thank you.
Okay, so a question that I missed. Thank you for re-asking it. So a question is, and I know this person is I think he's starting uni next year. So he's amazing. He's really young, and he knows PureScript. He does some like he's working on a lot of things. And I definitely had no idea what functional programming was before college, and even in college I didn't know much about it. So the question is, would you recommend the university to Haskell students? What is that the question? So would he recommend you go to university?
Oh, that's a hard one. What I love about university is the social aspect, right? I love that you're in classes with people who are learning the same thing, which makes it easier to stay on track. And it also exposes you to things that you probably wouldn't have exposed, that you might not have exposed yourself to. In uni, I took like a lot of classes on things I had no idea what they were because I was forced to. And then, 5 years later is when I learned the value of those things.
Yeah.
And so, that might be an issue of motivation in those classes. But would I recommend it? Not across the board, no.
Yeah,
If you are interested, then do it. Yeah, I mean, you'll learn things. I wish I had studied more CS. I studied software engineering. And so that was very practical of like how to build systems and how to make sure that they don't crash and testing and all that stuff. And it really avoided all of the theoretical stuff. And if I could go back, I think I might even do like a math degree, just to get a sense of the theoretical stuff.
So I know that they live in the same city as I do, and I'm obviously going to plug the university that my wife works at, because they do have a Haskell course, which used to be third year, and now they moved it to second year, which means that they want to do it earlier, right? And there's a few very good teachers there who do Haskell, who do logic programming, who do algebra and things like that, and I think it's valuable. And I think luckily, since the university also focuses, of course they do have their Java database whatever courses, which you might find boring or not interesting, but seeing the other side is not always terrible. But yeah, they definitely do have some interesting computer science theory there. So
something that I loved about university was the focus on fundamentals. And I have a lot of friends who sort of went to coder boot camps, and they go and they can write code and they do just fine. But they have no sort of idea of what the computer is doing, right? Of like, how is the system built? And so my education like started with analog circuits and sort of derived all of computers from that. And whether or not I get value out of that, I don't know, but it's so interesting to know and really informs my ideas of how we could change the system in the future, right? So anyway, so yeah, if you're interested in the foundations, you're not going to find that anywhere else, I don't think.
Yeah, that's true.
Without really heavy, dedicated self-study.
And that's why it's like the local university is the place where if you don't really care about it, you can pass through it without learning a lot. But if you do care, the teachers are more than happy to help you, give you more stuff to learn, help you, and it's kind of that sort of place, right? Where if you want to slide through, you can, right? It's not they're not very, very rough on people, I would say. And also coming a bit. Sorry.
Oh, so I wish I was more aware of that when I went through, because I definitely slid through uni.
Oh yeah, me too.
Right at the time, it sort of feels like the thing you need to go do to go get jobs, and like.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, I'm like, oh god, there was so much valuable shit that I was paying for and then not listening to.
Yeah, and I could even go to teachers and ask them more questions, and they're so happy when you do that, right? They're going to give you so much good information and references and all of that if you do that, because so few people do that, right? Do the extra effort for some classes at least. But I was going to say, so you were saying about math. Do you think that if you did math in college or university or whatever, you'd still be doing like Haskell right now, or would you be doing something else? Because that's interesting, right? Because if you wanted, like, if you go to a math degree and you're really inclined to that sort of thing, you might just go on and do like math research or something, and you might not focus so much on FP. I know maybe you'd probably prefer that, but I was just saying that maybe.
I don't know. I think Ed Komet is in a good situation. I think the dream is to be like Ed, right? From what I understand, I don't know if this is true or not, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is like Ed just sort of does his own libraries and gets sort of more or less sponsored to do that, right? He makes bank,
Yeah, I think so.
right? That's the dream, right? And so, I mean, I complain about Ed's documentation quite often.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's a fair complaint, I think. At least like some things are easy because I know them already. But for example, the first time I look at machines, my head was about to burst. So yeah.
But my understanding of Ed is that he has a math degree, right? And so he works things out mathematically and then just turns them into Haskell programs and just trusts that the theorem is interesting in Haskell, even if he doesn't know what it's useful for, right? I forgot what my point was, but I think that's really cool. I think that's all I got on that topic. Sorry.
Okay, so Monoid Musician says, I'm going to college for math plus Silo, and I personally like math since I wouldn't learn anything from the CS courses. That's also a fair point, right? Because if you're in the place where you already know PureScript and Haskell have been working on libraries or on code or whatever, you're probably not going, like the Haskell course that I mentioned, that's not going to teach you anything, right? Those are basic. Like it's in that course at the local university, at least the last part is monads, right? So you're not going to get much out of it. Maybe some relationship to the theory if the teacher is inclined to do some sort of like explanation, but you probably also know some of that, right? So most people are familiar with like Quatler stocks or with proposition as types and things like that, right? So again, you don't have a lot of time to, yeah. So let's see, as somebody who went to a bootcamp, I feel like I'm missing an understanding of low-level stuff, math and algorithms. Yeah, that's Jonathan Lorimer, who I think doesn't have a CS degree, and he, okay. I thought boot camps were a good thing until I saw the little knowledge people who get through them. Yeah, and I don't have a great, like a very good opinion on boot camps.
I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. Like,
although I like maybe Haskell boot camps would be more interesting than like, because most boot camps are what, like Node.js, learn MongoDB, things like that. I learn a technology, which
but yeah, they up and running. They make shit happen.
Oh yeah, sure.
They make way more like things than I do. But yeah, for a long time I thought that I should have just not done uni and just done a boot camp. I think my opinion has changed on that in retrospect. But I love that they exist, and I love that they can get people into the field without 5 years of their life, right?
Yeah.
Because like 4 or 5 years is a huge investment, and it's worthwhile if you're investing in sort of that knowledge. But if you just want to go get a job in tech, I mean, it's sort of waste.
Oh yeah, for sure, it's wasteful. Yeah, if your goal is a job in tech, don't bother. With pretty much anything, you can easily get that. If your goal is to kind of understand things better, then uni could help. Like a good CS foundation can definitely help. And it's not something that you can surmount by reading on your own. It's just going to be easier to get the base.
It's a lot easier to do with the social structure of everybody doing it around you.
Yeah.
I just started reading a book yesterday about a lawyer sort of looking back on his career.
Mm-hmm.
And something that really resonated with me is he talks about how law school doesn't teach you about law. What it does is acts as a gatekeeping device to keep the wrong people out of law, right? And wrong in some sort of air quotes. I don't know. But I thought that was like such a fascinating insight, right? Which is all the law people I know. My girlfriend's currently doing law school, and so I get to learn a lot about law school. And my impression is like it sort of teaches you theoretically what the law should be, and it is so far removed from anything you would ever use on the job. But it's mandatory, and also you have to do an undergrad before that, right? And so it's 7 years of mandatory schooling to act as nothing but a gatekeeping mechanism.
Okay.
And so I'm happy that boot camps exist to ensure that the typical CS degree doesn't turn into that same boot camp.
Oh yeah. At least over here it was for a while. So until like programming quote unquote exploded, software engineering jobs exploded, at least over here in Romania, there's a lot of like getting a programming job. You definitely needed college, right? There was no way around it. Whereas now, since there's so many openings that you cannot fill, they don't care if you know how to code. If you say you know how to code, they'll try you out at least. Right.
Yeah. And I love that about our field, right? Which is just nobody gives a shit, right? Nobody cares where you're from. It just, can you do it?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and again, it's insanely well paid for like compared to the average salary or income over here, right?
It's like a fairy tale, right? Like,
oh yeah.
As far as jobs go, it's very cushy.
Oh yeah, for sure. So let's see. Agent Ultra's asking if you have any recommendation on evangelizing algebra-driven design to non-Haskell communities. And thank you for the book.
Can you read that? Sorry, what?
So any recommendations on evangelizing algebra-driven design to non-Haskell communities?
I don't know, man. My understanding is that it got posted on Hacker News recently.
Oh yeah, don't read the comments. I got annoyed.
I have a strong rule, which is to not ever go to Hacker News.
Oh yeah,
because that's not the audience.
Yeah, for sure, not even close.
Right, and so I got a lot of emails after that saying like, "Hey, sorry about the haters on Hacker News." So I'm sort of afraid to go look at it now. And I don't think it's anything particularly bad. Just the usual Hacker News Haskell post or Haskell related post. It happens every time. It's okay. But so I think what it is I met a programmer last night who writes Python, and we were telling sort of the non-technical friends sort of what's the difference between programming languages. And to him, programming languages are only valuable in the libraries that they have, right? He only writes Python because it has machine learning stuff, right? He only writes JavaScript because it's on the web. To him, it's more of a, it's a tool, right? And to me, that's not at all how I think about programming. I think about programming being tools for thinking, and probably for worse, I think about myself as a Haskell programmer because it really informs how I see the world, and especially how I see code. And so I was trying to contribute to a Python project the other day, and it's just like, I just can't. It's just so painful. Right? But the thing is, the Python people don't feel that way.
Yeah, that's
right?
definitely true.
They don't know any differently.
They might even get annoyed by from you saying that, right? They're like, well, what do you mean? It's.
I'm sure they will, right? And so the thing is, there's this big inferential distance, right? The problems I see in Python are because I have exposure to ideas that you can't think in Python. And if you think in Python, you're never going to see the flaws.
Yeah.
I think Paul Graham writes about this and calls it the bloop principle or something like that, bloop principle.
I can definitely echo that because I used to do C# before I got into Haskell, like for 10 plus years. And before I never thought that I'd need sum types. And now I wouldn't be able to write C# anymore because I'd reinvent sum types there because how did that even work before that, right? So
right. I was writing Lua code the other day, right? And so Lua has this misfeature, in my opinion, that any global variable that doesn't exist will just return null, right?
Okay.
and like it's a special null, it's its own value, and so it
Okay.
but there's no types to speak of. And then if you insert a field into their only data structure, which is called a map or something, a table it's called, but it acts as a hash map and as an array. If you insert a value of nil, it sort of removes it from the thing. And so you can't, like, if you iterate over it, it doesn't show up anymore.
Okay.
And then also, there's the length of function. And the length of function doesn't compute the number of elements in the table. It computes starting at 1 and going forward, does each key exist?
Okay.
But if your array starts at 2 instead of 1, it's all 1 indexed. If it starts at 1 instead of 2, if it starts at 2 instead of 1, then it says the length is 0.
Okay.
Right? And so, but you can accidentally set the first element to nil if you have a typo. And so just like these nils, they propagate everywhere. So a single typo cost me like 2 hours of debugging.
Whoa.
Which is partly I'm not familiar with the language, but it was also partly like, that's stupid, right? It's so dumb. But I wrote Lua happily for 6 years. 6 years
Before you got into Haskell, right?
And this was never an issue I ran into, right? It was just, that's the way life is. Sometimes you need to debug things, and then you put in a bunch of print statements and you figure it out. Yeah. Right? And I couldn't have even imagined that this doesn't need to be the case. Right? And so if you try and pitch like Haskell saying like, oh, we have all these things and the compiler checks it. Nobody knows what that means if you're trying to evangelize it to an audience that
JS or Python or whatever, right?
Right. If they haven't felt the same problems, they're not going to appreciate the solutions.
And again, there's a thing like we Hasklers think of the compiler as a tool that helps us, whereas people coming from dynamic languages especially will see it as their enemy. Like, hey, I know this works, why can't I type this, right? Why won't you let me write this code, which I know is correct? Yeah.
Partly, I think that's also caused by the fear of the type system, right? Where if your only types you've ever experienced are in Java, what does it buy you? Really nothing. And trying to tell a Java programmer about the Haskell type system, like their eyes glaze over and they just don't understand.
Yeah.
Because what we mean by types are not really the same thing that they mean by types. I mean, to get back to the question of evangelizing algebra-driven design, the issue, I think, is it is such a fundamentally different paradigm that we need to start teaching people. I don't think we can dive in, right? We can't dive in and say, here's algebra-driven design, unfortunately, because that would make my sales go up. But instead, I think you need to, someone on the Reddit, I think, mentioned that the first step is to convince people of libraries as design patterns. Okay. Right? Where like you import MTL, for example, right? MTL doesn't do anything, but it's a design pattern, right? And that's such a weird way to think, where in the object-oriented world you have the design patterns book.
Yep.
And you implement the design.
Django 4, the Bible, and that's
That's it, right? You make an observer pattern, and you have to do that on everything by hand.
Yeah, that's the list of patterns. That's what you're going to use, and there's very little additions or anything to that list, right?
Right. And so people, like, that's, I think, the first step, right? The first step is to convince people that libraries can do more than just write subroutines for you, right? Libraries can be design patterns. And until you start thinking about that, there's no way in hell you're going to be able to convince people that like a monoid is valuable.
But then most languages, at least most popular languages, will not allow for such libraries or make it very hard, right, to write such libraries, I think. Or at least they feel very anti-patterny for the language, right? They don't feel like a natural addition to the language.
It's been so long since I've written any other languages. I don't know if I have a true insight here. But I've been writing Lua the last couple days, where like there's no map function implemented, right? But you can implement it, no problem. Okay. So I did, right? And then I went and I implemented currying for functions, and it's like It's tricky, but you get it. And so a lot of these these dynamically typed languages, you can do a good amount of work, right? We could definitely improve the ecosystem with these sorts of patterns. But I think it's not what most people think of when they think of library. They think of library's functionality. And I think that might be the first thing to tackle.
Although there's, like, for example, in JavaScript world, there are those Fantasyland and so on, like libraries that enable FP, and then those are definitely kind of in the area that we're talking about, right? In the
Yes.
like giving you a different sort of patterns to work with.
Have you seen the GitHub thread that Brian McKenna, is that his name?
Oh,
Brian
the
McKenna?
the famous one with the like
the famous one.
yeah.
That is a case study, and it's fascinating to read through. For anyone who's unfamiliar, Brian McKenna posted a thread saying the JavaScript promises API is wrong, and if we made a subtle change, we can make it monadic, and then that would be a good change. And it's like 1,000 comments of people arguing past each other, and nobody on either side really understands what the other side is trying to say. So it's sort of embarrassing in that front. Like I applaud Brian for all of his work. It is because like he has so much more patience than I would have had in that circumstance.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But it's clear that he's not phrasing the argument in a way that these people understand.
Well, if anybody has the link in chat, just paste it, because I think not everybody knows about it. So I don't have it right now, but
it's a fascinating read.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Where was I going with this? I don't know.
I think I mentioned it. Yeah.
Right. And the thing is, like Fantasyland is great, but again, you already have to buy in to the idea that this is worth doing. And until we can convince people that that's worth buying into, and I think first you need to show that there's pain without doing it. You need to show that like the everyday pain that of programming that you're sort of invisible to because you've never experienced anything else, that feels like just part of the job. You need to show that needs to be there.
I definitely agree that pain is the motivator here. That was for me, for sure. Like I was doing C# and TypeScript, and we were having a ton of bugs on that. Well, not a ton, but more than I would like to, right? On the TypeScript side, and started looking into alternatives, and that's how I found PureScript. And then I got to Haskell and so on, right? So I think it does have to come from pain if you want to switch something, right? Maybe to a junior, to somebody who's very young, you can, maybe they'll be interested in spending time on their own and reading on something, but most people you'd have to like go this route, right?
I think inspiration will do enough to get people asking the questions. If you can show some like really cool applications or ideas, it's probably enough to get someone to read an article, right? And if you can get someone reading an article, maybe you can show them that this pain doesn't exist here, just to plant that seed in their mind. And then if they start seeing the pain, then I think that's the first step to fixing it, right? Is acknowledgement.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's see. Do you have any other questions or anything else? I've already kept you for about 2 hours, so let me know if you're tired or want to stop. I think we'll probably be winding down soon anyway, because it's been 2 hours already. But
no worries. I got maybe another 15 minutes in me if there's more questions, and if not, I'm
cool. If we have any other questions in chat, then please add them. I'll double check my list because I don't want to forget anything. So more people are pushing FPTS at work apparently. So I don't know. How do you feel about that? Because I've been through this at the job I was mentioning earlier when I was doing C# and TypeScript. I found PureScript and I'm like, okay, let's see if I can push this, right? And I started reading the books, and I started basically doing. I was reading in the evenings and all night about these sort of things, and then I was trying to kind of go back to the job, because I was the dev lead at the point back then, right? So I was trying to do some sort of teach the others the concept and so on, and kind of propagate them back and see if they stick, basically, right? And there was like, we had some, I actually managed to introduce a small PureScript app, because there was like a small greenfield project that was might as well do it in PureScript. But as soon as I left for a full-time Haskell job, they quit, right? They quit doing PureScript, not they quit the job, right? So it didn't stick, right? I was if I stayed there, I was probably been able to do some more FP there. But do you have any experience with this sort of thing, or what do you think about it?
I've got some unsuccessful experience. So I've only, I think, had one non-FP job since learning FP, so I don't have a lot of experience in this, but I worked at Google for a while, and I worked on a compiler there that was written in C++. And it was sort of written with proto-buffers as the data format that the compiler consumed and used as intermediate forms, and it was rough. And so my sort of strategy was going to be to write a parallel Haskell implementation. Right. And then my thought was, every time I add a new feature in C++, that takes like a couple weeks, then I would implement the same change in Haskell and send it around for review. Just to get people to see how much less work it requires to implement the same feature.
But then there's a lot of work to get it initially done, right? Because I had the same idea as you had, but I was like, okay, this is a huge business app that will take me a very long time to do it, to bring it up to date, basically.
Yeah, that wasn't necessarily the case for me. Most of the issues that I was having were C++ issues.
Okay.
Of just I need to write a traversal, but it has to go over protobufs, and protobufs generate this code, right? And so I can't just add the functions I need.
Okay, fair enough.
So a lot of it was that. At Google, there were 3 separate implementations of catamorphisms over protobuffers, and every single one of them had a different bug in it.
Cool. Yeah, protobufs always seemed weird to me when I read it. I was like, okay, this looks weird, in some ways at least. So we were getting questions now. I guess there was a bit of a delay.
Okay.
So what's the pain point in the design space that algebra-driven design could help with?
The pain point, I think, is in implementing the wrong thing. So what really motivated this for me was at my last Haskell job, we were building a system, and we went through 5 iterations of complete rewrites of this thing, because we could never figure out how to articulate it in a way that was extensible and in a way that actually solved the problem. And really and truly, we did 5 complete rewrites of it over the span of a few years. And it was just a thing that we could not figure out how to implement this.
Okay.
We just would convince the conventional design approach did not work.
Okay.
And I think we were more attuned to this than most companies would be, because we were the Haskell guys. And I think had it been harder to write, probably we would have just kept the implementation we had, and as Jonathan Lorimer says, just continue slapping features on, right? Just hide the pain by putting more features on top. Right? Yep. If it doesn't work, throw shit on it.
Yeah.
So I think, so what's nice about this is I threw algebra-driven design at it and got the right answer.
Okay.
Right.
So back to the old problem that you're having at that job.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's partly an argument there that oh, you implemented before and you learned something, which is probably fair, right? But what I love about it is that the API that it comes up with is so far removed from the implementation. It turns out the API is nice for humans and for thinking about, and the implementation is completely different and really fast. And I don't think most techniques of design allow you to separate those concerns.
Cool.
At least not with heroic effort.
Yep, makes sense. So what other languages do you like beside Haskell?
I write a lot of Haskell, to be honest with you. One of my goals for the year was to learn something new. What I've had my eye on is APL, because I met Aaron Su, I think his name is. He's the APL guy who implemented the APL compiler. And he just like walked me through compiler design in APL.
Okay.
But what he was talking about was, if I'm recalling this and not misquoting him, he was saying that APL programmers sort of hate abstraction, and because the language is so terse, they'll just copy and paste the same logic everywhere, because you can see so much code at once that it doesn't make sense to have to like do the page shift where you switch and like see what else, like the context shift is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me sounds so alien.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like that is completely against my sensibilities.
No reusability, no, like you just rewrite the same copy paste code, right? Yeah. That sounds insane.
I know. It sounds insane, but also here's a guy doing like legitimate work.
Okay.
I was like, my jaw was on the floor talking to this guy. So I want to give it a go, just to make sure I haven't fallen into this like Python bubble, right? Like Python where, compared to Haskell, where we say, oh, you don't even know the value of types, right? Maybe my lack of other languages is sort of restricting me here. So to answer the question, I don't write any other languages, but that's one I'd like to look at.
Okay, cool. So let's see.
Maybe we should do 2 or 3 more.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think we are done with the questions. Okay. To be honest. Yeah. Well. Okay. You said that the book is out now. You said that you have some few things that you're finishing up before you want to do a second launch.
Yeah. So the first one I just sort of posted on Patreon, and then somehow it ended up a little bigger than I was expecting it to. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's fair to say or not. I was sort of hoping it would. So I'm not upset about that by any means. But yeah, so it's available right now. algebradriven.design mm-hmm. is the website.
Yeah, I've linked it a few times in chat already. Okay, let's do it again.
Yeah, cheers. And so I guess it's sort of in soft launch right now, because mm-hmm. the first one had like a typo on the first page, which was really embarrassing. And I hope everything's ironed out now. I'm hoping that will be the case. Apparently my proofreading is not so good. So so I'm hoping to get that launched probably within a week.
Okay, cool.
And at the same time, I'm working on hardcovers. I make a lot less money on the hardcovers, so I'm trying to not pitch those as much. Mm-hmm. And my suggestion for anybody who does want a hardcover is to buy the PDF for maybe $20 less than you'd plan to spend on the book. Mm-hmm. And then you can buy the hardcover for $20 is the plan.
Okay.
So that's my proposal. So that's where it is. Very excited to be done with it. And I'm really hoping to sort of hear feedback to make sure that, like, to me, this is a good idea, but it's so far away from most people's experiences that I'd love to get feedback to make sure I'm not crazy, you know?
Well, I'm looking forward to going on with the next chapters, because I think it's very hard to. So one of the things, I don't think this is the kind of book where you can give feedback after a chapter or two, right? You kind of need to get a feel of what you're trying to say there, right? So I feel like I need to learn to read at least a few more chapters before I have a good idea of what's going on. But it's like, I really love the introduction.
Thank you. That means a lot.
And the first chapter as well. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Yeah, people are saying that it was awesome. Okay, cool. So do you have any pro editors? Maybe the last question.
So do I have any what?
Pro editors. I guess people that are like professional editors.
Oh, no, not at all. I signed up for Grammarly for the first time, mm-hmm. which is like some online editing AI thing.
Okay.
And I threw that at it, and it came up with a lot of good suggestions, a lot of like crap.
Okay. Cool.
But I found editing. What I'd like to do is pay editing in sort of like in royalties, but mm-hmm. editors don't work for royalties. Okay. Because most books are crap and don't sell.
Fair enough.
And so right now I don't really have the cash to pay up front for that, mm-hmm. And don't really want to go into debt for it. So
that's fair.
Yeah. So no, I don't. But if anyone would like to do pro editing for me, hit me up.
Cool.
And then just like. One other thing, though, is the subtitle for the book came from AI. I was fighting so hard to come up with a subtitle, and I was just completely lacking on inspiration on it. So I fired up GPT-3 and I gave it some prompts, and I said, I need a subtitle. And like we had a 3-hour chat about subtitles. And eventually we came up with this one. So I
Okay.
think I don't know if it's true or not, but it might be the first book with a title generated by AI.
Cool.
I'm hoping so. Historical not.
Well, that's cool. Okay. Well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Absolutely.
It
Thank
was
you so much for having me.
very
It's
fun
been-
chatting
it's
with
been-
you.
Oh, it's been a delight, man.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Thank you very much for coming here, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime.
All right, for sure. Great. Thanks everybody for all your great questions,
Okay.
and thank you. Glad for having me. All right.
Yeah. Thank
Have
you.
a good weekend.
Bye bye.
Bye.